Good evening and good day to all, and welcome to the second meeting of our consultation. Δύο λεπτά γιατί ακούω τους μεταφραστές. Δύο λεπτά.
Λέξε το English πάντα, Σταυρό. Ή το off ή το English.
Ωραία. Πάτησα το off και δεν με καταλάβει κανένας. Συνεχίζω. I decided to take upon myself the task of addressing the topic fear and faith during the pandemic with a great amount of hesitance, particularly being coordinator of this consultation. The reason I chose to address this topic is that over the past several months, my own faith has been challenged within the agony of fear, not only due to the dangers of the pandemic, but also having to face the threat of death on a personal level. What I will be offering you today is a culmination of what I have learned from my life experiences, from my service as a pastor and a hospital chaplain, and my work as a clinical psychotherapist. During the feast of Christmas, we hear the angel telling us, "Fear not," just as it told Joseph and the shepherds. All the Christmas narratives proclaim a message of hope and a powerful intervention in a world that has lost its path. Yet it seems that now the world is spinning into an unprecedented future. Fear now prevails everywhere. We wake up in the morning and we listen or watch the news which constantly describes the catastrophic consequences of the COVID-19 virus. We are told that the invisible enemy who is attacking us with great force and who can enter every part of our life. How can we not feel terrorized? Then there are the conspiracy theories, which prevail in conjunction with the misinformation given by many unreliable sources. There's also a misappropriated fear, which has been cultivated within religious circles due to declarations of faith that are based on fundamentalistic type of religiosity. Surely in all this, the exclamation of the angel's message, "Fear not," has been overshadowed, if not ignored. Why such fear? One could answer that the pandemic took us all by surprise, but Albert Camus states at the beginning of his highly cited book, The Plague, there have been many plagues as wars in history, yet always plagues and wars take people equally by surprise. The reality is that this pandemic should not have taken us by surprise. Epidemiologists have been warning that there will be a pandemic, that there will be a pandemic, and it will continue, and it continues to warn us that there will be even a bigger pandemic in the future. It seems, as Camus well points out, that we ignore the facts of life and are taken by surprise when calamity hits because we are all wrapped up in ourselves, over-involved, always busy, imagining that we are invulnerable and free from an ugly intrusion. Instead of living in a meaningful way, we seem to drift through life, being taken by the waves. We become a prey of aimless days and sterile memories, sulking because we do not have what we want and wanting even more. As wandering shadows, we seek to acquire substance only by consenting to root ourselves in our trivial concerns and our own self-centered fears. It is no wonder that we cannot hear the angels telling us not to fear. But This still does not completely explain why there is such fear. It seems that the main reason has been overlooked. If the pandemic did anything, it completely overturned the foundations of what societies have sought to do for years by way of industry and technology. It has debunked the myth that there are no limits to human omnipotence, that we can control every aspect of life, that we have an unlimited potential to constantly progress onward and upward. What this myth has caused is a sense of powerlessness, impotence, and a loss of human significance. Postmodern man fluctuates between pride and fear, pride in his achievements and fear that he will not progress and gain what he desires. The greatest obstacle in doing this is death. Death is his greatest fear. And that is why modern man has found multiple ways to deny it. Besides debunking the myth of human omnipotence, the coronavirus brought death out of the closet and made it something very real. Western culture has made every effort to beautify the tragedy of death. Even though we see wars, famine, pestilence, and violence on our screens, death remains very distant from our daily life. Even when close friends suffer and die, the thought of our death and the death of our loved ones will rush through our minds for only a split second. It has come to a point where we even feel fear in fearing death and grieving it, which is one reason why there is a rise in panic attacks, especially during the pandemic. The pandemic brought the fear of death to the forefront on a personal and collective level, and that is what has made the pandemic so frightening. There's one thing for me to die, but another for everyone around me to die as well. When death comes to your door, life suddenly stops. Everything you have believed in is put to question and is confusing. The emotions that race through your mind in a minute of time go from remorse to hope, from fear to confidence, from faith to deep befuddlement. The anxiety of death consists of the fear of nothingness, that of non-being and the loss of everything, the fear of losing your most beloved ones, the fear of eternal non-existence and the complexities that will be left behind. It is the fear of pain and decay, the fear of human devaluation, of losing one's human dignity as a person, the fear of insignificance. More so, the fear of death is the fear of total and eternal loneliness and isolation, the fear that that we will be forsaken by God and our loved ones during our illness and in our final hours. The event of death, though, does not add anything more to the fears and anxieties of our life. It only reveals the weariness of our life past. The restrictions that have been placed on us due to the COVID-19 virus have accentuated the loneliness, the lack of meaning and emptiness that prevail in today's societies. Viewing the televised scenes of those being put on ventilators in intensive care units, the refrigerator container for corpses that was placed outside of New York's Elmhurst Hospital, the mass graves for those that died because of the virus has not only caused a sense of depersonalization of human existence, but a sense of defamiliarization and disidentification in relation to the world. Now the world seems even more precarious. It is as if it has lost its hominess, as if we are living in exile. Danger pervades everywhere, and everyone and everything now is seen as a threat. Faith in human relationships have been fractured, increasing the anxiety of one's existential death. For man was not created to live alone. How do most of us combat our anxiety regarding death, nothingness, and non-existence? As Kierkegaard writes, by displacing it from nothing to something, we transform our fear of non-existence to a fear of something which is outside us. Here is the origin of conspiracy theories. Denying the existence of the hidden enemy, we launch a self-protective campaign that tries to dispute it, labeling it as a sheer myth. To support our cause, we seek to find allies, most often, though, through a fundamentalistic type of religiosity, and develop rituals and beliefs to placate the threat of death, launching a zealous campaign to detoxify the illness or to defy it, ignoring its consequences. Such denial and defiance is utterly irresponsible. But where is faith in all of this? I am sure that many of you will say, if one has faith, one will not experience such anxiety, and that all I have described is only for the non-believer. I will state from now that this is not true. To understand my stance, we must first examine what faith is. The difficulty in explaining this is the way the language regarding faith has been misused. The language of faith has been associated with theological terminology, doctrinal explanations and concepts that seem to have lost their powerful meaning and their relevance to life situations. The language of doctrine has become a type of intellectual skepticism, a demonstration of power, and a tool of self-defense that leads to self-arrogance, absolutism, and a lack of inclusiveness. We have come to a point where we use plethoric biblical and patristic passages to support our case or our cause, whatever our case or cause may be. And this plethoric citing has resulted in theological misinterpretation and confusion. The language of faith has become a tool for zealous campaigns, such as that against the coronavirus. Recently, I remarked to a nun that masks should be worn in church, and she responded that it does not coincide with the ecclesiastical teaching of the faith. I wonder if she even understood what the term she used really meant. Instead of finding something new and revolutionary in the words we use, such as redemption, reconciliation, discipleship, the cross, and the resurrection, we now have come to the point where these words have lost their power and credibility. Throughout the pandemic, it seems that the language we have used regarding faith has not made a radical impact on people's lives. They can promote change, and that is a basic problem. The faith is no longer associated with change. St. Isaac the Syrian says that there is a faith in correct doctrinal belief, a common faith in a Trinitarian God and his church. He describes this as a lofty and common faith. As lofty as it is, this faith does not free man from presumptions and doubt. If we remain only with this faith, we will not grow in the grace of the Holy Spirit. There's a higher faith which is born in us through God's grace and which brings us to spiritual knowledge and awareness of all things. This faith becomes our most ultimate concern and is an act of the total personality, which includes all elements of personal life. It grows in us as a mustard seed, and by it, we become partakers of Christ's divine nature. It puts another perspective on life and our relationships that are not confined to the limitations of this world. And because of this, it provides for the consolation of hope, which makes the heart strong. True faith in God cannot remain stagnant. Believing means to believe in someone, not in something. It is a maturing and life-changing process. Our faith will only mature if we wrestle with it, if we struggle to keep our relationship with God and our fellow human beings alive in a world that impersonalizes and dehumanizes relationships, that makes them a commodity on an individual and collective level, that rejects kenotic love as expressed in Christ's being. We always want to be impressed by great miracles of faith, very often making miracles a commodity. What we neglect is that the greatest miracles of faith are when we choose to love rather than hate, to forgive rather than reject and disengage, to give thanks rather than sulk for that which we do not have. If we do not become aware of our human predicament, our powerlessness and human limitations, we will not be able to grow in the true meaning of faith. True faith begins when life situations bring you to a stopping point, when you are faced with the reality of death in your personal life, both on a physical and an existential level. As St. Isaac says, it is not possible to recognize truth without gaining experience of afflictions. And facing death in our human limitations, we will be able to see the tragic side of our life, which we often ignore. In doing this, we will be able, with God's grace, to transform our mode of living that is full of diversions, meaningless activities, and petty anxieties to a more authentic mode. Not a life of self-fulfillment, but a life in which the image of God is restored in us, allowing Christ's love to fill our entire being so that we can form meaningful relationships. True faith is not a personal experience, a type of mystical contemplative event. True faith leads us to the Catholicity of being, where we are united with God in his holiness, together with the choir of angels, his saints, and all those that struggle in this world. The faith, though, can be terrifying. In recognizing our limitations, we will also have to recognize our unwillingness to change. And facing our faith, we will not be able to ignore our doubt. Faith is uncertain insofar as we live in the complexities of this finite world. It is intertwined with doubt as far as our relationships are distrustful, as far as we are not united in harmony with one mind. The pandemic only increases the lack of trust that has been prevailing in our communities for years. It has brought to the surface the discord that exists in our church. Now, not only do we not know what to believe, but we also do not know who to believe. It's a wonder if we really believe in anything. As Adam Curtis states in his documentary, The Power of Nightmare, when a society believes in nothing, the only agenda is fear. One should add that this type of fear will only lead to violence. It is unfortunate that during this time of pandemic, we have not appropriately addressed how faith is related to trust and change. We have limited the whole subject of faith to whether or not one believes that the virus can be contracted by receiving Holy Communion, by wearing or not wearing a mask, and if God will or will not protect us while we cram into our churches for services. When we try to assert our faith in this manner, faith becomes an ideology or a political stance that will lead to either despair or cynicism, or to both alternatively. This stance will eventually be mocked and unacceptable to many, leading to indifference and complete unconcern. The church will just be ignored. What we do not realize is that such a defensive stance is only a cover-up for our instability to accept the inner fears we have on the subconscious level of our existence, that we are afraid and insecure of ourselves, of what we really are, of what we are not, and of what we might do, afraid of our human destiny, afraid of the unimaginable and unexpected changes faith demands of us, afraid of facing death, afraid of our doubt regarding the reality of life everlasting. I would like here to note Miguel de Unamuno's Father Manuel, who was considered a saint and gained popularity due to his pastoral work. Father Manuel would never say the last verse of the creed, I look for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the age to come. It was as if he used his ever-ending social activism and pastoral work to cover up his disbelief and the fears associated with it. The freedom found in faith is having the ability to recognize how weak our faith really is. This freedom is often frightening, yet only by acknowledging our weaknesses will we allow God's grace to care for us. St. Maximus tells us that the person who has come to know his weakness of human nature, the person who has come to know the weakness of his human nature will gain experience of divine power. Such a person will know that just as God has helped him, he will be able to help other human beings who are also struggling in their faith. In ministering to the sick and dying for the past 45 years, I found that the only thing I can say when sufferers express their fear and lack of faith is that I can understand and share their agony very well, and I really do. What I can assure them, though, is that I know from my own experience that God's love is with us all, and that even if we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, he will be with us and will not desert us. I will assure those that suffer that I will remain with them in prayer. In confessing our fears and lack of faith, we will be humbled. St. Isaac reminds us by saying, "Blessed is the man who knows his weakness." God will not despise a broken and humbled heart. Until the heart has become humbled, it cannot cease from wandering. For humility collects the heart. As soon as a man has become humble, mercy will surround and envelop him. And when mercy draws near, the heart will perceive help at once, because confidence and force will also move in it. And when a man perceives that it is this which aids him, then at once his heart is filled with faith. Then it will see and understand that prayer is the refuge of help, the fountain of salvation, the treasure of confidence, the sheet anchor amidst the storms, the light in the darkness, the staff of the weak, the shelter at the time of temptations, the medicine of the time of illness, the shield of protection in the battle, the sharp arrow against the enemies. And because by prayer he has found the entrance into all this good, he will delight in prayer of faith forevermore. In closing, I will just state that in the final analysis, the greatest problem of our times, especially during this time of lockdown and confinement, is that we have forgotten how to remain still in solitude in prayer. For it is only in prayer that we will finally be able to deal with our fears and find true faith. For my prayer is, Lord, I believe, help my disbelief. Thank you.